Welcome to Food Travel Talk TV, a new monthly talk show brought to you by the World Food Travel Association, the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Food Travel Talk TV was created by and for the world's culinary travel trade. Its goal is to inspire us all with ways to help us do business better. Each month, we invite industry thought leaders, opinion makers, and trendsetters to discuss important topics for our industry's benefit. I'm Eric Wolf, and I'll be your host today for our July 2020 episode. This month's topic is how digital marketing strategies in the food and beverage tourism industry are changing because of the pandemic. And I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. First, we have Shonette Laffy, Digital Marketing Manager at Visit Bristol.
Hello.
And we have Veruska Anconitano, Digital Marketing Consultant, and her website is anconitano.com.
Hello, everyone.
Now, before we get started, we'd like to remind everyone except the speakers to please keep yourselves muted, and there's no need to broadcast your video, so you can go ahead and turn it off and save your bandwidth. Lastly, we will also take questions only via chat. You can find the chat window in the lower control bar of the Zoom window. Feel free to post your questions at any time. We will reserve the last 20 minutes or so for our guests to answer your questions. And now I'd like to set the tone for today's episode. The way we all do business has changed significantly in the past 6 months. As business owners, we have gone through the 5 stages of loss and grief, namely denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Many business owners are now in the acceptance stage, and we need to know how to prepare for success in today's new reality. And obviously, that means knowing what to do with digital marketing as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to start off with a question. Then and now, in your opinions, what are the most significant changes in digital marketing in general since the pandemic has begun?
I'm happy to start. I think from my side anyway, I think the biggest one has just been content. Being able to have much to talk about and being able to do it sensitively has been the biggest struggle from both a kind of tourism DMO perspective, and I also do some freelance social media for food businesses. And I think, again, it's just kind of knowing what to put out when there's nothing really to say and how to reassure people without panicking people. So it's always balancing that kind of communication strategy all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the biggest changes and struggles as well has been shifting from being a proper business to being a personal business. So the majority of food businesses in the food travel industry have to change from being just perceived as businesses to being perceived as humans. And they weren't used to be seen as kind of workers, people, they were businesses, and they have struggled, and many of them are still struggling these days. But this is possibly one of the biggest challenges and changes caused by the pandemic.
So Shonette, you were saying the challenge is content and trying to figure out what to say when there's nothing to say. But some people might argue that this is the perfect time just to drive brand awareness and just to keep the message consistent.
Absolutely. I think that's one thing I've been key to say to people, is that as much as it's been a really difficult time, and of course a lot of people's priorities has been their families, their staff and everything like that. But I think it's kind of making people still aware that you're out there, and, you know, like Veruska said, actually being honest about the challenges you're coming up against, because I don't think people were aware of, say, how tight margins were for a lot of bars and restaurants and food businesses, or, you know, how much trouble they were having help from, you know, the government, or just the scale of the problems that they were coming up against. And even just things like, you know, online services for a lot of people. I think a lot of people just expected that if a restaurant couldn't trade, that all of a sudden they could do online delivery, or that they would have a good website. And I think it's been a big wake-up call on both sides to businesses that maybe they didn't have as much infrastructure as they should have done, but also for customers that it's not as easy as just saying, okay, well, switch your entire business model overnight because that's what I would like. Yeah.
Veruska, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think we marketers tend to think that it's easy to shift from being one thing to becoming another thing. But the majority of the times we are talking about small businesses and they don't even know what is digital marketing. So as soon as the pandemic started, they really had to study, they really had to improvise, and they really had to shift from doing something they knew to doing something that they didn't know how to do and still don't know. So brand awareness is important for marketers, but for businesses, it's possibly one of the hardest things to do if you have never done this, because you have an established business that has sold itself without marketing or without any action, and then suddenly you have to basically do everything by yourself or hire someone that you have to pay, and you struggle because you have to pay and you maybe don't understand what this person wants you to do. So it's really, it is the time to experiment. I totally agree and I'm on board, but it's also the time to recognize that not every business can experiment because they don't have the capabilities, also in terms of knowledge, time, and now also money, because this is another aspect that we need to consider as well.
Yeah, I think that's part of the brand awareness, is not just, you know, focusing on the products that people know you for, and maybe the new things that you might be changing towards, but also part of your brand is who your people are and what your situation is, and making people aware of that, and you know what your plans are, and that maybe that down the line you would like to maybe be doing some sort of online events, or you would like to have an online shop, but realistically there is a reason you can't do that right now, or even just things of, you know, maybe our food, you know, we haven't got, you know, a photographer at the moment who can take some good photos, so at the moment we're just using our camera phone, just little things like that, that just being, I think, honest, people do accept that and appreciate that a lot of the time, more than I think businesses sometimes think they would.
You know, it's kind of, well, listening to you talk about this, it reminds me of traveling on a highway, on a freeway, a very fast highway, maybe in a city like Los Angeles where there's 5 lanes across, right? So a massive highway. Everyone is going at, you know, 100, 120 kilometers per hour. They're following way too closely. And all of a sudden, something happens on the road ahead. A truck tips over, or a car hits another, or something happens, and everyone on the highway is now in trouble. Everyone has to put their brakes on. Everyone has to stop. Some people have gone off to the side of the road. People are trying not to hit each other. Okay, now the traffic has stopped, right? There's been a few accidents. The traffic has stopped, and now everyone on that same highway is trying to figure out how to go around the accident. And that's exactly where we are. And some people with the 4-wheel drive cars are going off to the side, and other people with tiny cars are not able to go as fast or as easily around the accident. And it's kind of like that now. We're all trying to find our way around this big accident.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, you know, I think even the businesses who had some sort of, you know, kind of crisis management or, you know, plan B, which I think even for the most established businesses isn't, you know, who prepares for something of this magnitude, but also the long-termness of it. It's not a kind of immediate, you know, that something's had to close down for a couple of weeks, or that, you know, I don't know, someone's left the company. This is something that could go on for potentially years, and knowing how you deal with that, I think, is just incomprehensible to most people, regardless of if you've got a business or not. But I think one thing that the Bristol businesses have done really well is clubbing together to kind of come up with solutions, and that's been really nice to see, rather than shoulder it all individually.
So giving people rides in the cars that are getting around the accident, right? Helping them to get around.
Car sharing.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, well, okay, so before this all happened, businesses of all kinds had digital marketing plans in place that may no longer really be entirely relevant, at least not right now. And it's one thing to show people beautiful food pictures to entice people to visit, but much of the world is still in lockdown and people either can't travel or can't visit most restaurants, wineries, and breweries. So how should businesses change right now their digital marketing strategies?
So for me, there are 2 ways to address this. both on a short term, but also on a medium and possibly long term, because it's something that maybe start the foundation of something different. The first thing is focusing on the locals. We know we are talking about food tourism, but the locals are always there, and the locals drag tourists as well, because they generate word of mouth. They have friends visiting, they have people, there's internet. So, and locals have to be your core business at the moment, your main focus, keeping them happy and listening to them. And also, if they complain, take the complaints on board, make sure that they come back, come to you, and that they are happy to come to you. And the second part is focus on being authentic the more you can, and use social media to reach the people that cannot travel to you. Bring your food to them. And when I say bring your food to them, is put value on what you do without stressing out about the quality of your content, of your pictures, of your video, but show the people what your people can do. What are the producers you work with? What's the main reason why, when travel will happen again, they may visit and they want to visit? Instill in the travelers the need of visiting, and bring them into your kitchen, or you're into a hotel, or into your brunch place or restaurant or whatever it is, because that's the only way you can survive. And if businesses can combine speaking and talking to locals with starting to create a authentic relationship with tourists, they can survive, and they may have a way around all that's happening, because they have foundation, they have the locals, and the locals. I'm extremely a big fan of focusing on the local people, because they bring tourists as well. So that's my biggest advice, and what I am advising to everybody at this stage, which is also,
Yeah, I absolutely agree with those two. Locals first and foremost, and I think it's a very easy trap to fall into, that especially if you work in a kind of high tourist density area, that a lot of what goes into marketing or your focus is what the tourists or the kind of further afield tourists are, and you forget sometimes about that your locals are there all year round, and they're the people who talk to their friends. They have family and friends visiting all year round, and they're the people who can come back more often. Realistically, it's all those kind of things. And just as a kind of politeness thing, they're the people on your doorstep. They should be the people you should be working alongside and having that local pride. But I think it's also about having that all year round inspiration. So having at Visit Bristol, we've had a lot more focus around images and videos. We've been doing more image competitions on Instagram, where we've been setting a little theme around either food and drink or street art, and just trying to get more people to send their photos in. And so you've got all this kind of bank of really beautiful pictures, and getting people really excited about visiting when they are able to. But also it encourages the local people to have that pride at a time that's actually been quite difficult, to actually then focus on nice things, like digging out their favorite pictures from the past, or telling us about their favorite place that they like to order kind of local things from. But I think also just making it, I think part of the ongoing digital marketing should be, as well as inspiring people and making locals more of a focus, I think it's just making people aware of the other options. It's not just about coming in and say booking a table or coming into your shop. It's also where can they buy online? What other options do you have? Can they order a meal from you online? Do you do, say, online workshops? A lot of restaurants here have started doing, like there's one tonight, which is a fish masterclass from one of the best restaurants in Bristol, where they're doing how to fillet fish and how to prepare different dishes. But then as part of that, they can talk about some of the amazing food they do and their wine matching. And it also not only shows you the quality of kind of chef that works in that restaurant and the sort of food that they do, but they're imparting knowledge. They're kind of almost positioning themselves as local experts. So it's stuff that is really useful and positive right now, but it's also for later on, people will think, oh yeah, that food just looked fantastic, the restaurant looked beautiful in the video, and you're just creating that excitement. And I think as long as you can keep building that excitement for people, that's the main thing. Keep momentum going is the main thing at the moment, I think.
I wonder if there's any risk of the locals feeling that they're being taken for granted. One of the things that we've always tried to do in the association was to recommend to tourism offices and governments that they should not neglect the locals. For this is one of the very reasons, but also locals are your biggest brand ambassadors anyway. So, put the coronavirus completely aside, but imagine that all 15 million people living in London or all 20 million people living in New York travel, they're ambassadors for that destination. And they can talk about all the great things and the locals only and the secret places and the hidden places. And that's one of the things that we've always been saying. And I think that some local residents may be feeling like, oh, well, we weren't good enough before, but now you're interested in us, maybe. Do you think that's a risk?
I think it depends on the kind of destination you have. Luckily, because Bristol historically, more of the tourism was local and regional than it was international anyway, we haven't had as much of a struggle to show that a lot of our content, we used to work, we've always worked with a lot of, say, local photographers and local bars and restaurants. So we have a lot of civic pride here already that we can build on, but I can definitely see why that would feel that way in other places. If you've not really had that engagement with local places, with local people, that it would seem a bit, oh, right, now that you've got no other choice, you're interested.
Right.
And I think there's a mixture of either just being upfront and saying, we've had to, change everything about the way we do, and not specifically that we didn't notice you before, but we've had to just rethink the way we're doing everything, and your local businesses need your support more than ever. And it's that kind of use them or lose them mentality of like, we know you were already supporting anyway, but now is the time, and to also help shape your town. If I think there's been a lot in tourism at the moment that there's a lot of things in tourism that didn't work, and now is a good time to overhaul that. And I think if you're bringing the residents along for that and asking them questions, saying, well, okay, if we are rebuilding the way that we do, say, outdoor eating, or the way that we do delivery services or food festivals, how would you want that to go? And I think just making sure that they're consulted a bit more, I think makes a big difference. If people just feel that they're heard, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I completely agree. The more you engage with people and the more you get them involved in what you do, the more they participate. Even if it's just asking for an opinion on a new dish or a new set of tables, just listening to people, give them power to help you and empower them. So I think the approach local businesses have with locals is crucial now. But it's crucial now, but in the future as well. So it's not something that has a specific reason to be just now. It's something that should happen now, but in the future as well. But not just be, it's a way of giving and receiving. You cannot just ask, you need to give them back something that can be just taking on board an advice, a criticism, an idea, everything basically. So if you just ask them to do something, they won't. If you listen to them, they will help you and they will become your main supporters.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Shonette, you are speaking on behalf of a destination that you said exactly was a largely local and maybe regional destination, not so big on the international radar, but it's getting there. But think about bigger cities or regions. So let's talk about the province of Catalonia in Spain, right? If all of the people living in Catalonia are deciding that they never want to spend time in Catalonia, that they always want to go somewhere bigger, better, fancier, whatever. And I think part of the problem too is when you live in a destination, you don't always go to those places that are fancy. I mean, I lived in New York and San Francisco and Sydney, and I never did any tourist things there ever. And now that I'm not living in those cities, I regret it because I didn't have those experiences. So I think that the tourism office, they a lot of times are funded by government money, and the mandate is it has to bring in new people from outside the area. But I don't know. I think some of that money should be redirected towards marketing to locals on a
Yeah.
permanent basis.
I grew up in London, and it was really dependent on what sort of attraction it was. I think museums, definitely because they were free, felt like as a resident, you were excited to go to museums and galleries. But for the attractions, I barely went to any when I lived in London. So it's only now that I go back to visit family and bring friends from different parts of the country that we would go to the Tower of London or on the London Eye. But it's not something, as a resident, you look at something and say that's going to cost me 30-40 pounds when you're already, paying big city rents and, all the things that come with it. I think, there's a lot to be said for kind of almost doing local tourism days, or doing a lot more local discounts for locals, because, I think, I'm very proud of growing up in London, but it's very difficult sometimes to recommend some of the tourist activities there just because of the price. And I think if you've been to them, you can justify it a lot more.
I think we can be tourists in our own backyards as well, especially in these larger metropolitan areas. And I will frequently talk about Los Angeles or Mexico City, which are vast metro areas where you could drive for 2 or 3 or 4 hours and not even be on the other side of the town. But imagine that you found out about a new market or a new restaurant or a new cooking class that was a 2-hour drive away. So yes, you're in the same metro area, but you can still be a tourist in your own town, right?
Yeah, you can. I think and I think that's a general problem, possibly not for smallest town or cities, but I'm from Rome, and I've never been to the Colosseum in my life, never. So just to name one, so if I have to go to a class that is 2 hours from my place, I need to have an incentive to do so. Why should I go there? Why it's different? Why do they want me? What's in for the local people? Like, for example, just bringing Italy has discounts for Italians going to museums or to attractions. Then we don't go as well, but still there are discounts. And the same could apply to food businesses as well. Why not? If you want locals to talk about you, you need to invest on them. And if they have to spend time to reach you and to try your food, your classes, your experiences, you need to give them something, a reason to go. Otherwise, they will stay in their neighborhood, or they will go somewhere else, even outside of their place, in another region. Or, well, Italy is a perfect example of this. People don't travel, used not to travel in Italy on summer. They used to go to Greece, Spain, and sometimes France. And this year they are forced to stay in Italy for obvious reasons. And a lot of them are rediscovering places that they didn't even know they existed, and they have an incentive to do so. Whether it's a discount, whether there's a particular offer, a festival or something that attracts local people. I think that's the key, and that's something that should be enhanced even more in the future. It's just like, give me an incentive and I can spend a lot of money, but I need to know why and what's in for me.
Or a new product or a new experience of some
Exactly.
kind.
Anything, basically.
I think it's that placemaking thing, isn't it? Because in London, or even in places like Bristol, I think you're more likely also to kind of branch out as if you feel that you're going to a completely different area that feels very different. So say in London, it might be that you go across to Richmond, or you might go, I don't know, across to Greenwich, that feel like they're their own sort of mini destinations within a city. But it's all about kind of marketing what's around that. If you come out for the day, you can go to this market, you can get the boat here, you can do this. And I think it's not enough just to say, be a tourist in your own city. It's exactly what Veruska said. You've got to frame it around, if you go to this part of, the city, you'll be able to do this exciting thing, or even just kind of doing a campaign around that, like, did you know that you've got this in your city, or you've got that in your city, you've got this festival or this museum you might not have known about. And I think there's a lot more that could be done around attractions to market the food and drink in that area, and kind of areas grouping together to kind of market themselves, so that you kind of have that full round day package, that you know you're going to have a great lunch, that you're going to go to do something interesting, whether it's a festival or an event or a museum. And yeah, it's a bit more of a ready-made day out, rather than you're driving 2 hours to see one particular thing. It's everything. It's a mini holiday.
Well, I'd like to shift the conversation now a little bit to the digitalization of food and beverage products and experiences. And by that, I mean things like the online cooking classes, the master classes, how to fillet a fish, creating things like PDF recipe books. I know Devour Tours did this of their guides and other staff members. And they created this digital recipe book, and everyone was really excited. And so all of these digitalized experiences, is that really all we can hope for right now in terms of digital marketing? Stuff like this?
No, hopefully not. I don't think so. I think that's a short-term solution, and just to keep the boat alive and afloat. And something that you also do to manage expectations and for brand recognition. But no, I mean, it can be part of the equation, but real experiences, in-person experiences will always be the best thing you can offer to travelers and to locals, when we still don't know when this will happen again on a global scale. But still, I honestly don't think, and I don't hope that we will reach a point where we will experience everything online, even if we use VR or stuff, high-tech stuff that will help us. It's a totally different experience, something that it's irreplaceable, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think that in person is always going to be best for people, but that I think it's not a bad thing that a lot more businesses have had to think about their online presence, whether that is just, you know, tidying up their Instagram account or improving their website, adding an online shop. And even if they are, you know, doing some online events now, I think depending on how those are received, because they're a nice bonus for some of these restaurants or shops to showcase some of the skills they have, or do, you know, say if it's a vineyard, for them to do some online wine tastings. Those are always going to reach more people than you would be able to reach potentially coming to your vineyard. So it's an extra form of advertising, and you can save that, you can have it on YouTube. But yeah, it's never going to be the same as showing, as face-to-face, showing people, pouring them your wine, talking them through it, having that nice time together. But I think it's a nice fix in the meantime, and I think it has got people thinking more creatively. There are a lot of businesses who I'm really surprised weren't already, say, there were quite a few places in Bristol that do, you know, either whether it's kind of, you know, frozen dumplings, or they do cake, and they didn't have any online delivery. But now they've kind of been forced into doing it, and actually it's another element of their business they've had to learn how to manage. And hopefully that can continue, because there was obviously a demand for it. It didn't exist before. So I think things like that would be good to continue if there's other ways to get your business to people, or even, you know, doing those odd online events. But yeah, definitely agree, in person is better.
So really, this is a big, painful reset, but it is also reinventing how we do business, and probably for the good, ultimately.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, and you know we had to ask this question, but some restaurants and bars in some countries are allowed to open now if they can enforce the 2-meter distancing rule. Should this restricted availability be promoted as some kind of feature or benefit in the digital marketing of these businesses or destinations right now? And if you think so, what would be the best way to feature or promote it?
I think there's definitely an argument for that sort of exclusivity, and the excitement you can get from kind of pre-booking something. If a restaurant had to go from 40 tables to 20 or 15, saying that, you know, we only have 15 tables, we only have 8 tables left tonight, and this is our menu. I think it's nice for a restaurant that if people are pre-booking, it helps them with their wastage, that they know exactly what they're selling ahead of time. They can kind of even maybe get that money in ahead of time if people are pre-paying. But almost I definitely get more excitement when I've pre-booked somewhere than when I just show up on the night. I think especially if you organize your kind of pre-booking on your website, if you've got a really good website, some nice photos, you have an email confirmation that maybe kind of says something really nice about the menu and what's going to kind of happen on the evening, you make that more of a special experience than if people just happen to walk past and walk in. I think it's it's just trying to make that experience extra special, in lieu of, you might have to have some plastic screens up, but I think anywhere that I've been the last couple of weeks, people in restaurants or bars have been working extra hard to still make it friendly and still make it comfortable. And I think there's an opportunity to do that with your emails and your website as well, and social media.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that I want to add is that in many cases, customers are not used to prepay. But one of the things that it's good to advertise and to use in this time for businesses, that you book and you prepay or you give a deposit.
Yeah.
Because in this way it shows commitment from the customers and commitment from the business side. So it's strengthening a relationship that may exist as well or may start from scratch because of the pandemic. But the more guidance you can give, and the more it's not a nice word to say, but the more rules you can give to customers, the better it is for your business, for their sake, for their security, but also to feel that sense of exclusivity that sometimes it's what people need, especially after 4 months at home. They want to say, hey, I booked at that place and I already paid because I really want to go. So get them excited, but also demand prepayment, even not full prepayment, but a deposit, because it keeps the relationship open and honest, and they feel obliged to come. Otherwise, everywhere in at least the UK and Ireland, everywhere, every business is already complaining about no showing, and it's a big problem, and businesses cannot afford this now. So exclusivity means also asking to prepay or leave a deposit as a commitment.
The first time I experienced this notion of prepayment, I was living in San Francisco, and you can imagine there's a lot of hot restaurants, and the way the restaurants dealt with it there was you prepaid it, and if you didn't show, they told you on the phone when you made the booking that if you don't show, then it's a $50 charge per person on the reservation. And there was an article on Sky News this past week about Michelin star chef Tom Kerridge, who has a bar and grill in the Corinthia Hotel in Trafalgar Square in London. And he was complaining that 27 people did not honor the reservations for his restaurant last weekend. And that's jobs at risk. That's food wastage. That's huge.
Yeah, I'm still appalled, absolutely shocked at how many no-shows there have been. But I also think this is the time for restaurants. I think more than ever, they've got sympathy and understanding mostly on their side, more now than ever, to say, okay, enough is enough. Blanket now everywhere. If you're making a reservation, at the very least, it's a deposit, or like you say, it's a charge if you don't show up. Whether that is, £5, £10, £20, £50, whatever that restaurant decides is suitable, or you prepay the whole menu. I've done both, and I'm always happy to do it, especially at the moment, because like you say, that's the cost of the food they're getting in for that evening, and most cancellations are last minute or they're no shows. So it's still very difficult to, especially in this climate where the footfall is lower. You're not having as many people walking past and inquiring if you have a spare table. But it just means as well that I think we just need to get past this idea of food and drink being so, especially in restaurants and bars, it being so transactional. It spoils how special it is. It should be something you're excited about and that you have that relationship with. And I'm not saying that, somewhere like McDonald's shouldn't exist, but then they've always got that sort of churn that they can kind of get away with people, maybe, well, they don't have bookings anyway. But if a restaurant, if you've taken the time to reserve that table and taken that space away from other people, then you should be willing to then accept you're going to be charged if you can't be bothered to cancel it.
What's the problem, right?
Yeah, I honestly don't understand.
We already do for hairdressers, beauticians, and a lot of other services. I mean, sometimes also health services, you have to prepay something or leave a deposit. So why not for the food and drink industry? It just makes sense. Not just now, it always makes sense. It will always make sense.
Yeah, and I see someone said about illness as well at the moment, and I definitely think that, you know, most businesses do have a policy of, I think it's up to 12 hours before the booking or something like that, or the day before is usually their policy, that if you cancel that you won't be charged. And I think it's up to them to decide, but I think usually if you're ill, you know the day before, or you at least know that morning if you're not going to be able to make it. And I think especially if you know that you're going to be charged £50 or something, you're more likely to go, you know what, I've been feeling a bit this week, I'm just going to play it safe and cancel or rebook. But yeah, I think it's a good opportunity in so many ways, just to overhaul the way we've been doing things in tourism and food. And this whole system of booking does not work. It does not work for restaurants, it doesn't work for people can't respect it, so it has to change. And I just think restaurants, I understand them not wanting to kind of potentially impact their costs, but I do think that overall there'll be more of a benefit than there will be a backlash.
Yeah.
So again, another positive outcome of a very grim situation. It's driving change in the industry that needed to happen anyway, really. Right. So I'd like to ask now about social media and private networks. And so we found in our 2020 Food Travel Monitor that the usage of Facebook in some areas, notably the United Kingdom, had been waning. But now with the pandemic, some people have said that more people than ever are actually on Facebook as well as other platforms. So what is really happening with Facebook specifically? And have you observed or heard about an increase in new user signups on that platform, or are people already defecting to other platforms that are perceived as being more private and secure, like Viber, Telegram, and our association's own GastroTerra network?
So what I've seen the past 4 or 5 months is a different usage of Facebook. Aside from people looking for news and posting news, Facebook has become the channel where you go to for customer service, basically, because it allows to get in touch with businesses basically in real time, whether it's a chatbot or a real person. It allows you to have an interaction and possibly also an answer to your question. And so I have noticed an increase in the usage of Facebook, mostly for the purpose of using it as a customer service channel. Private network, Telegram, I've noticed a lot of people on Telegram, but it's just a different type of people, more youngest people, and not really concerned about the privacy stuff. Mostly like it's just a chat that nobody can track. But not in the industry, not something that I notice in the industry. The biggest trend for me has been a shift from perceiving Facebook as a social media to perceiving and using it as a customer channel, a customer service channel from both sides, both from businesses to end users and end users to businesses. And a lot of places have opened their their groups where they have discussed things with locals, or where they have accepted requests for refunds and stuff like this. So it's from being just a pure social media to being another channel like Zendesk or something similar, at least for the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Facebook, and to an extent in the last year or so, Instagram, have become a lot more customer service than just mere marketing. But especially now, because especially back in March and February, information was changing so quickly. There was no way that your website would be up to date. Like even the Visit Bristol website, we were sat there all day trying to update listings, and even then it would be out of date by the end of the day. It was much easier just to put things out on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and say, this is the latest update. But also our DMs are open, our chat window is open if you've got any specific questions. And I know that when I've been looking for places to go, I've been checking their Facebook or their Instagram and not their website, because at the moment I can't rely on the fact that website, understandably so, it's a lot more faff and expense to change your website with your latest menu or your latest opening hours than it is. And even Google listings a lot of the time aren't reflective of your opening hours, but Facebook will be. And I think even just with things at the moment, like we did have a restaurant in Bristol who said that one of their staff members had been tested positive for COVID, and so they could put that news out, but also because there were comments, respond to people in real time, and people actually, the response was really good. Whereas I think if it had been a statement on a website that was just flat, you wouldn't have been able to judge. There would have been a lot more concern, because there was this, there was a lot of questions from people and they were answering immediately. They kind of avoided, from what anything I could see, I thought it would blow up, but it really didn't. People were really appreciative of the fact that they were so open, and they were so willing to reassure people, but be upfront and say, well, this is how long we're going to close for, this was the day in question, everything, and just being completely transparent. And that's the benefit that I think a lot of people overlook sometimes with social media, is that it hasn't got to be this everything's great, here's a snazzy photo. It's an opportunity for you to show the behind the scenes, the everything that's going on, and more so now than ever.
So these digital platforms and these private networks, Viber, Telegram, WhatsApp, although a lot of people don't know that it's actually owned by Facebook, but that's another discussion. How can people use these to start targeting? How can they be used for marketing?
Well, it's the same business model that you use for email marketing, really. Mm-hmm. It's just more direct and easier to use. I've seen businesses, and I've managed, and I still manage businesses that send out promotions via WhatsApp, for example. Or there are systems in place where you can create your own newsletter type and send special offers, news updates on everything using Facebook. So it's like a chatbot within a chatbot. So it's basically, if you treat these new real-time, fast kind of networks like a newsletter, where you can get out promotions, stay in touch with people, get reservation, ask for things, it's actually can be way more effective than just posting randomly on a Facebook page, because the people that subscribe to your WhatsApp channel, to your Telegram channel, to your chat on Facebook, private chat on Facebook, are extremely interested. They are customized. They know what they want from you, and you know what they want. So you can send them customized offers, ask for opinions. There's an extremely high return on investment with these channels, way more than Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything, YouTube, everything else, because it's a one-to-one relation. Yep. Rather than being one to many, it's really one-to-one, and the user perceived you, feels like the business is talking personally to him or to her. They don't feel that they are discussing with possibly 100, 200 people all together in a chat. So it's really a one-to-one channel, and it converts really well, extremely well, if you use it with a certain salt in mind. I mean, if you don't start spamming and you have a strategy in place, it works extremely well.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, is that knowing that those are your much more engaged and kind of targeted audience, but it's also one that you can kind of lose because it's so direct. You've got to be so careful about what you're sending out and it not become too frequent or too over the top. I think that's because that's one thing we've always been very wary of, is that in the same way that with our more general email list, we try and keep that to maybe every 2 weeks or a month or something, and that's more generalized. But if we were going to do segmentation or any of these more private networks, we would probably want to keep that to a month, or until we have something really specific, like a really specific offer to say. I think it's just being very careful with those, because those are your most kind of heavily invested fans. You don't want to misuse that relationship.
It's interesting. I think with a lot of people moving towards these new platforms, the question I would ask is, how do we find out about these private channels? And really you don't in most cases. But what if there's an influencer, could be a blogger or an Instagrammer or whoever is the influencer, makes available to marketers, hey, I have a private WhatsApp discussion group and I've got 3,000 people on the channel, or I host a private chat on Viber every week and we have 900 people on there. So this is actually something that could be monetized, could it not? And not to be abused, but maybe a product placement could be sold.
They are very, targeting, definitely, and exactly what to send them, because like Veruska said before, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, that's so generalized. It's still useful in its certain purpose, but the more, if you have a list somewhere of people who you can offer, and that however percent are going to book or.
Okay, how about keeping a standby list and holding the table for 30 minutes to 1 hour and then reselling it if no one shows? That should avoid some waste. Which digital platform is working best for you and why?
I think it's completely up to restaurants. I think they've got to make that decision, because there are a lot of restaurants in Bristol, for example, are so small, and actually a lot of their windows are about 2 to 2.5 hours. So even holding for an hour, you're missing half of, and if you've only got 10, 15 tables you can use, that's still a very large potential booking you've lost out on. But I think it's all about being upfront and honest. I think when people are booking with you, as long as you're talking them through that and saying, this is why we have to take this deposit, or this is why we ask for full prepayment, is because of this. And I think people, if they understand, if you decide you want to hold the table, if you say, oh, we will hold it 15 minutes or an hour, it's completely up to the business. But I think it's about, Veruska said a few times, setting expectations and being honest. I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it depends by the place where you are, by your business, but you need to set up rules, because you have rules as a business to follow. So people have to have rules as well. And if they are willing to eating out, they are willing to follow and respect the rules, hopefully.
Sure.
You never know, but hopefully.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What was the second part of the question? Was it about
the second one was, which digital platform is working best for you and why? So maybe just it's a more general digital marketing discussion of which platform you both personally use, and maybe which is your favorite and why you prefer that.
Mine's kind of twofold, because from the Visit Bristol side and also from the food business side. But I'd say really that for a more tailored business, the Visit Bristol email list is very broad. So we get great open rate, but in terms of, we don't do that much stuff that is book this or buy this directly in there. It's more that it would link to a page of hotels or a page of food and drink. But I think email for bars and restaurants more specifically is super powerful and has a really high conversion rate if you're doing it well. And it's like we were saying with those private networks, it's your link to the people who are the most interested in you. They've chosen to sign up. And I think not enough businesses remind people on their social media, or or even when people were booking with them, saying, oh, would you like to be added to our newsletter? We send out offers, or we send out our latest menu or our next booking window. People like that. Or if you do, if you have, say, music in your restaurant, or in, you do certain events, people, will book ahead for that. But I'd say across every business I work on, Instagram is the fastest growing, has actually a much higher purchase rate than it used to, and conversion rate. I think they've done a lot in terms of both the shop kind of function on Instagram, but also the link swiping. If you have a big enough account that you can also put links in your Instagram stories, it's really useful. But even if you've got a simple enough website, I've found it that if you just put that in an Instagram story saying, whether it's visitbristol.com or go to our website and click on this, it still has a very high conversion rate for a lot of things that I've put up. And yeah, I just think Instagram, if you're you don't have to be using it a lot, even if you put one thing up a week, or when you've got something to say, it's used so broadly by everyone, and they do tend to check it a lot of the time before your website. So it's worth kind of having some sort of presence on there, I think, depending on the audience, obviously, but it's growing so quickly.
Sure. Veruska?
Yeah, well, for me, it's from a business standpoint, I'm actually seeing a growth in Instagram as well. And one of the channels that I didn't expect could perform so well, not in terms of SEO, but in terms of conversion and real relationship with people, is Pinterest. So if you master Pinterest, it requires a lot of effort at first, because you need to find a strategy, because otherwise you use it just as a search engine, but it's way more. And they also added a function called community, where people can interact with you. So it's basically, it's a mix between Facebook and Instagram at the moment. And conversion rate is crazy, and it's crazy on a short term, and it's even better on a long term. So if you can find a strategy, if you focus, it requires again a lot of effort, but Pinterest, it's highly converting. On a short term, I think Instagram for businesses, food businesses and tourism businesses still is the best. But there's this one that's still niche, and that really, it's really customized and really engaging, and can be the new one, I think. So keep an eye on Pinterest and start experimenting, because it can give you a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah.
Thanks, Veruska. Thanks, Shonette. I'm back now, and I am turned off my video to reduce my bandwidth. It's crazy. All these people are hungry for internet now. Right. So have you asked your client list what they're planning to, where they are planning to travel next, and what key factors that they're going to base their decisions on? I imagine that's probably for Shonette.
I think, well, like we said earlier on, there's been a lot more interest in local and national travel than there has been. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about even just kind of the local reception they'll get from people in certain places. If you go, that there might be some areas that are still very worried about receiving tourists, or even just the fact that there are some places, like I'm sure, like in Venice, where they've really enjoyed the break, and that maybe they aren't as keen to get the influx of tourists back, or maybe they are, I don't know. But I think people are a lot more interested in maybe trying some places they wouldn't have done before, but I think we've got a really good opportunity to inspire people in the ways they're a lot more open-minded than they would have been, I think, a year ago, to try something new and to kind of handhold a bit more and give them more information about itineraries and things like that. Because if people are going to a region they've never been to before, even if it is an hour's drive from where they live, just giving them more and more ideas around that is what we're focusing on at the moment, I think.
One question that came in, and the person asked, more analysts are increasing the timeline we will be living with COVID-19, e.g. 2 years or more minimum. What timelines are you working to, and what are the main factors influencing those decisions?
I personally haven't changed my working schedule with my clients, just adapted what we were doing to the new times. But everything stayed the same. It's just if we were doing a live event in Dublin, now we are doing an online event or something different. But if there's something planned, the things that we have planned are going forward with no change. It's a change of the medium and the message possibly, and also the final result. But the idea and the goals are the same that we had. So for the majority of my clients, I work on a yearly basis. So I tend to plan 1 year, and plan also risks and things that can happen in the meantime, month by month. And this hasn't changed so far. So, but it really depends by the businesses, and also how the businesses approach digital marketing because how big they are as well. So I don't think there's a unique answer to this. That doesn't. It's not a matter of one fits all. It really depends by how you structure your work, and also the business you have or the business you work with, because every business is different and knows its customer, the market, the goal. Some businesses have a goals set up month by month. Others have 3 years goals. So it's really impossible to say, how do you plan a strategy? It's just I recommend to keep doing what you had in mind, just changing how you do things.
Yeah, I think with a lot of places that I've been working with, it's being reactive to whatever the latest government guidelines are and what information is being given out, and trying to make that as accessible as possible, because not all businesses have access or have the time to read through everything. So it's also directing them to other websites or resources that make it more easy to break down, knowing what funding they can get. But I think it's also, making them kind of think as much as they can about, in the future, what are your plans for later this year, but also what could a plan B be? So if you were planning to host a festival later this year or next year, if we can't do that, what would be the next best thing we could do? Or what are other things that we can do? Maybe if we just, for now, I think a lot of the things that I'm trying to say to people, at least for the next 6 months, is kind of anything that is too big, we're just going to have to kind of either move online or scrap it for now. But it means you kind of frame it around the idea that gives us more time to focus on things, the day-to-day stuff you never get to think about, like, setting up your online shop, or, improving your website, or thinking maybe about other things you can do with your menu or your product, that you just get so busy with the day-to-day running and coming up with these big ideas and big plans that you can't always focus on. So I think it's that mixture of reacting to whatever is coming in now, but making sure that there are a few more alternative plans for should we, because we don't even know if regional lockdowns might come back, or when certain numbers of people or distances will be relaxed. So I think you've just got to have a couple of different versions of each plan, and then kind of just see what happens, really. But I think you've just got to stay positive and try and remind people that it's a good opportunity as much as it is a difficult one. I've tried to stress that with all my clients, like, there's lots of negatives, but this has given you time to do this thing, or we've tried out this thing that we couldn't have done before, so that's exciting. So and collaboration, I think, also speaking to other businesses and learning from what they're doing and trying to get more networks going. Bristol's always been great at that, and I think it's helped that the fact that they can group together, and whether it's building a little kind of website together, or we've got an online food market now from a lot of street food stalls who just basically clubbed together and did an online food market, so you can order food. And little ideas like that, I think, not only are they just good for the public to be able to order that food, but it just helps with that sense of community that we need now more than ever, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, both Shonette and Veruska. And Kathy from Denmark just wrote in, positivity is absolutely key, and I agree with that. I think that's probably the bottom line for this big crisis right now, is that you just have to stay positive. And before we wrap up, I would just like to ask both of you to just say really briefly, what is the one thing that you would like people to remember from today's episode?
I think one of the things with me would be feedback, whether that's from your locals or from your businesses. Like, communication is so important at the moment, and getting ideas from people. There's never been a better time to try and change everything to a better way that suits everybody. But the best way to do that is to ask other people's advice or experiences.
Veruska?
Yeah, I tend to agree. My answer was going to be community. So make sure you are surrounded by a network of people that you can rely on, whether are locals, professional, people in the same business, but also people in other businesses, because this is the time to grow and to take other ideas on board and make yours, basically. So why not just again turn something negative into positive, and taking ideas from others, even from other industries. It's one of the best things a business, but also a person can do this time.
Well, thank you, you both, Veruska and Shonette. I've really enjoyed listening to you. It's always, it amazes me all of the smart things that come out of your mouths. You ladies are so brilliant. So thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge. And for everyone who is on the call right now, the show, just to remind you that Monday, August 17 at the exact same time, we're going to be talking about cultural appropriation in food and drink. So registration will be open next week. Go ahead and save the date, and we will see everyone in August for that. So thank you again, Shonette and Veruska, and stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.